Thousands of years. Just let those words sink in for a moment. Thousands of years of kingdoms rising and falling, empires expanding and disappearing, rulers changing, languages evolving, borders being redrawn, invasions arriving, cities being destroyed and rebuilt, cultures meeting, colliding and transforming one another. And yet somewhere in the middle of all this extraordinary turbulence, something continued to breathe. Something continued to ask questions. Questions that perhaps belong not to one civilization, but to humanity itself. Who am I? Why am I here? What is consciousness? Why do we suffer? What is my duty? What happens when this life ends? And what ultimately is the nature of reality? This enduring spiritual and philosophical civilization is what we today broadly call Hinduism, and within its own ancient vocabulary lies the profound idea of Sanatana Dharma. But here is where the story becomes fascinating. How does a tradition survive for thousands of years when kingdoms disappear around it? How does it survive invasions, political upheaval, cultural transformation, and changing ideas? How does it continue when there is no single founder, no single prophet, no single central authority, and no single compulsory way for every follower to understand God, reality, or even spirituality itself? Perhaps the answer is hidden in precisely that. Perhaps Sanatana Dharma survived not because it remained frozen, but because it was never designed to be frozen. The word Sanatana is often translated as eternal, enduring, or timeless. And Dharma is a word far more expansive than the modern idea of simply religion. It can speak of duty, responsibility, right conduct, order, ethics, and the principles that sustain both individual and collective life. So perhaps it is useful to imagine Sanatana Dharma not as a single institution, but as an enormous civilization of ideas. A civilization that contains philosophy, spirituality, ritual, mythology, meditation, devotion, art, music, literature, pilgrimage, ethics, and ways of understanding the human mind. The Vedas, the Upanishads, the Bhagavad Gita, the Ramayana, the Mahabharata, the Puranas, Yoga, Vedanta, Samkhya, Nyaya, Mamamsa, Shaiva traditions, Vaisnava traditions, Shakta traditions, Bhakti traditions, and countless regional traditions that developed across the Indian subcontinent. Think about what that means. There was never necessarily just one door through which everyone had to enter. There were many, and remarkably, those different doors could exist within the same vast civilizational landscape. Perhaps one of the most important clues lies in something Sanatana Dharma does not have: a single founder. There is no one historical individual standing at the beginning of the entire tradition saying, "This is where it starts, this is everything you must believe, and this is the only path." Instead, ancient Indian tradition speaks of the rishis, the seers. They are traditionally understood not simply as inventors of spiritual doctrines, but as those who perceived, experienced, or realized deeper truths. And that creates a very different relationship with knowledge. The question is not always simply, who told you this? The question can become, can you investigate this? Can you experience this? Can you realize this for yourself? Look at the spirit of the Upanishads. Students question teachers. Teachers challenge students. Kings ask sages. Sages debate sages. And the deepest questions of existence become the subject of inquiry. Reality itself becomes the investigation. And perhaps this matters enormously, because when a tradition depends entirely upon one historical founder, challenging that founder's authority can potentially challenge the entire structure built upon it. But when a civilization carries within itself the idea that truth can be sought, questioned, contemplated, and realized, then questioning itself can become part of the tradition. That is a remarkably powerful mechanism for intellectual survival. And then there is another extraordinary feature. There is no single book containing everything that Sanatana Dharma is. Instead, there are layers upon layers of texts, philosophies, stories, commentaries, poetry, rituals, and oral traditions. The Upanishads can take us into questions about consciousness and ultimate reality. The Bhagavad Gita can place us in the middle of a human crisis and ask what it means to act, to fulfill one's duty, and to live without becoming enslaved by attachment to results. Yoga explores the relationship between the body, breath, attention, and mind. Bhakti opens another possibility, the possibility of approaching the divine through love and devotion. Jnana asks us to pursue knowledge. Karma Yoga asks us to transform the way we act. And meditation asks us to turn attention inward. Different questions, different temperaments, different paths. And perhaps that is one of the great reasons this tradition could continue speaking to different generations. It did not always insist that every human being had to experience spirituality in exactly the same way. And this brings us to perhaps the most fascinating possibility of all. Maybe the strength of Sanatana Dharma was not that it had one perfect answer. Maybe its strength was that it had the capacity to keep asking the question. Because when the world changed, the questions remained. And when the questions remained, the tradition had a reason to continue.